Hi, hello. I'm Jorge Carrillo from el Colegio de la Frontera Norte, and my colleague is Saúl de los Santos from Axis, which is a private company for strategic development. We're going to talk about the industrial policies for the bus of the electromobility in Mexico. This paper is based in a report that we delivered for the United Nations in Latin America. The structure of the paper is based on four main topics: the technological developments in the automotive sector, which is the main trends, and the impact on the industry and the market in Mexico, public policy agenda in this country, and the productive capacities in Mexico. Well, let me start. The drivers of the automotive transition, as probably you know, is the Industry 4.0, but this is the umbrella. For the automotive sector, is a consensus in the private, public, and academic. There is four trends: electrification, connectivity, autonomous driving, and diverse mobility. Of course, each of these trends has many different enabling forces that you can check on the screen. But the most important is to understand that nowadays is a consensus that these four trends are the main drivers in order to understand the future and the transition of the automotive industry. Just in the case, because we're going to talk about the EVs in Mexican case, well, electric propulsion, autonomy, and connectivity are the main issues. So, of course, each of these segment has a different environment. For instance, in electric propulsions, charging stations, service centers, home and private charging are key issues. In the terms of autonomy, special roads, traffic control system, telecom infrastructure, and connectivity, all the infrastructure of data transfer and intelligent engines in roads and cities are an issue. So this is also an important trend that everybody is not just searching, but developing in different regions of the world. We have a different pattern in terms of the worldwide car production, mainly for internal combustion engines and the EVs. So when we talk about the traditional cars, well, this trend of growth has been changed and is a drastic reduction since 2018, from almost 100 million to 90, and the last statistics from OECD is 77.6 millions in a global production market. The different regions such as China, Europe, and US, and the rest of the world, all of this have been declined from 19 to 2020 due to the COVID. And this is so clear, that information. But in the electrical car segment, the situation is quite different stories. Even though it's a very small amount of electrical car EVs regarding with the internal combustion, more and more EVs are developing, and nowadays are 3.24 million cars, mainly in China. But if we take all the European countries together, it's almost the same amount, and then US, of course. So, but this is a clear trend of plug-in hybrid EVs and especially electric vehicles. So when we talk about mobile charging station, batteries, and the sales, well, you see in the right side of this screen, the impact is low. So it's quite a different story than the traditional engines. Uh, uh, so the same is the case of the charging stations around the world, mainly from the private slow chargers, but also the public is growing, rapidly growing. Unfortunately, we don't have a more accurate data, but the growth is so clear, and even in countries such as Mexico is increasing. So, what is the situation in Mexico? First of all, the situation in Mexico is, as probably you know, Mexico has been one of the important global producers in OEMs, in auto parts, and in exports. And talking about the foreign exchange, well, is the main producer, the automotive, more than remittances from migrants, tourists, or even the petroleum, which is so clear in this graph. Uh, when we talk about just the production of the OEMs uh, for light vehicles and cars, we've seen a tremendous dynamism since early 80s in the last century. But and this cross different political parties in the country, left, center, and right. But the crisis has, of course, a serious impact in 2009 and of course in the COVID. But it's interesting because the recuperation is fast and faster than US than in USA. So this trend has been changed since COVID, but now is again in tremendous growth. Uh, so let me pass the micro to Saúl in order to explain the EV situation in Mexico.
Yes, so when we look into electric vehicle industry in Mexico, the two sides of the coins are we manufacturing electric vehicles? Are we using promoting consumption of electric vehicles? So in the first, Ford Motor Company has just recently announced manufacturing in a large-scale level of electronic vehicles in Mexico. And this is, I would say, it's one of the news that says that there's a good scenario in terms of the manufacturing for electric vehicles in the country. But if you look at the way the consumption is looking in the near future, one would have to say that high cost of the units, the low demand, the limits of the number of charging stations as infrastructure, few incentives, and even non-clear policies about promoting the purchasing of electric vehicles do not foresee a future where sales of electric vehicles, whether it be private vehicles or even public transport in terms of electric mobility, can be foreseen as something that will accelerate in a significant way. Even though it is recognized by the authorities, I mean by the public institutions, that transport has a great contribution in terms of the air pollution in the country. But in that sense, one has to see that policy doesn't follow. If we look at the infrastructure just in terms of charging centers, one would have to look that there's several states, a lot of the states that don't even have a significant base of charging stations. Mexico City, as the largest community within the country with over 20 million inhabitants, has just a few hundred charging stations for the whole community. And if we compare that to something like, let's say, San Diego in California, for just a small community, a very specific area, there's even a larger number of charging stations that for Mexico as a whole, as a country. So in that sense, in order for the electric vehicles as a segment to pick up in terms of the number of units, the infrastructure for charging has to follow in the same scale. One cannot foresee that or even take for granted that manufacturing in Mexico has a very significant presence. The productive capabilities of large international OEMs are very well recognized. Here we see a snapshot of the final end manufacturers of vehicles in the country. And we also have to look at a supply base for tier 1, tier 2, and 3 throughout the country. According to the National Association of Auto Part Manufacturers in the Bajío region, which is the central western part of the country, there's about 28% of the concentration of suppliers. And from the same organization, over 53% of suppliers are located in the northern states along the border with the US. And from that, if we focus specifically on the electronics, the electronic auto parts that are being manufactured, one can also see that they're mainly located in those states closer to the US. And this is very, very significant as a step going forward into changing the industry in Mexico into electric vehicles. This has been driven mainly by foreign direct investment. This is like an accumulated chart of about 12 states that have been leading over the past decade the reception of foreign direct investment, and one can see that it varies from year to year depending on the projects, but still, once again, northern border states have a significant presence in capturing that investment. And that's very, very relevant as a way moving forward. So talking a little bit more about the electronics. Electronics industry, it's also a large industry for Mexico. It is accounted that for several sectors such as the aerospace, about 20% of the content is related to electronics, 22% for electromedical devices, and so forth. But if you look at the automotive industry, currently we're over 40% of content in terms of electronic parts and components. And in the future, this could be even closer or above 80% content. So in that sense, the electronics industry also a very important large sector of manufacturing in Mexico becomes a transversal industry for several other industries, of course included the automotive. Taking a look at the electronics scenario throughout the country, it's a little bit below 1,000 manufacturers, over 300,000 direct jobs, and a presence in several states throughout the country, and specifically in, once again, the northern border region, where more than half of the establishments are located as export manufacturers. So in that sense, one of the most probable scenarios is a regional shifting of the location of the supply base. When we currently can see metal mechanics and plastics in the central western Bajío regions of Mexico as the largest concentration, if we look at the electronics, perhaps this is going to shift geographically more along the north of the country. And this is also something to be very, very careful into looking at, because of the capabilities that have been built there throughout the decades, and that they are very significant as part of the manufacturing base. If we look at the transport bus manufacturing in Mexico, this is also a very important segment of the automotive industry. And Mexico participates in a significant way. Our work with CEPAL in recent months was involved in looking at if the policies in Mexico were able to drive electromobility for public transport. And what we did find is that in terms of having implementing public transport with electric buses is still very complex. The levels of investment are, in some cases, even prohibitive to governments. The cost of the units are way beyond budgets. And also there's issues regarding the way that the concessions of operating public transport are divided into too many small leaders, groups, and even individuals. Unions, associations of transports are not willing to negotiate. There's no current motivation into moving into a modern, more efficient, more eco-friendly type of transportation. So in that sense, the area of opportunity comes into also the manufacturing part of the electrobuses. So as we're looking at this, what we find, it's a whole set of new opportunities. For Mexico, we wouldn't say that there's this debate anymore in the way forward with the US. If the industry is going to be pulled out from Mexico, move into the US. If China, it's also a matter of pulling more focus into manufacturing in Mexico in terms of providing content for the NAFTA program in order to participate in the auto industry. So in that sense, we do foresee that foreign direct investment is going to be keeping the main motor of growth for the manufacturing of vehicles in Mexico. And this is going to help and assist the current productive base into transferring operations and conversion processes related to gas consumption into electric vehicles. And that also provides a good scenario for the local companies to rearrange the productive chains and participate in better ways. And also, at the end, there's potential areas of participation in R&D in subsystems for the new vehicles, whether it be charging stations, components, and so forth. Because the talent is here, the industry has been present for several decades, and the way forward is just a matter of having the policies aligned and facilitating the processes of this transition, which is going on at such a faster rate that for the US and even for Mexico, it makes, we would say total sense to jump into and participate in a better way. I don't know, Jorge, if you have any other comments.
Thank you so much, and we appreciate your time, and merci, and